Well, good morning and welcome to another motorcycling video. As you can see by the title, this one's called The Future of Motorcycling in Australia, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Now, I'm prompted to do that after having watched a video from another Australian YouTuber where he talked about that, and I'll included a link in the description so you can watch his video and listen to his thoughts about the future of motorcycling in Australia and what he thinks are some of the problems and why they exist. This is not a video having a shot at him. This is a video where I've taken some of the things that he's talked about, I've expanded them, I've put my own spin on them, I've given my own opinion about them, and I've looked at some other issues as well. In 2024, sorry, I should have said at the beginning, this is the 3rd of January 2025. In about the middle of 2024, I made a couple of videos with similar titles, but talking about the future of motorcycling, and I was prompted to do that at the time because of some videos that I'd come across from the Motorcycle Action Group, which are a lobby group in the United Kingdom who were trying to lobby their members and those who were not members but were motorcyclists to be a bit more active in the lead up to the coming election in getting candidates, potential MPs and existing MPs to pay a bit more attention and give a bit more thought to motorcycling. It's almost certain at the time that there would be a change of government, and in fact that was the case. I can't tell you whether they've had any success or not because I've not come across any of their videos for a while. A lot of their concerns were to do with legislative changes in the UK, whereas the reasons for the decline or alleged decline of motorcycling in Australia aren't necessarily legislative, but it may be to do with a number of other factors. Also, you might notice in this video that at the moment I'm using a body-worn camera in a harness that's on my chest, and just about at this point, or in a few minutes, about the 5-minute mark, sorry, not at this point, at the 5-minute mark, if you stick with it for that long, you'll see that I change to the camera that you can now see mounted on the left wing mirror just in front of the handlebars on the motorcycle. At the moment you're getting the rider's point of view, and if you look at my hands, you'll be able to see my right hand working the throttle and my left hand, and especially the thumb on my left hand, working the shifter to change gears, to change up. This is a semi-automatic with a dual clutch. There are no clutch levers, no brake levers on the handlebars. I'm told that you don't necessarily have to close off the throttle to change gear, but as I'm used to doing that from my previous motorcycle, I continue to do that. So you might notice that, and then as I said at about the 5-minute mark, you will notice that I changed to another the camera that's on the outside on the mirror, which gives you a more scenic view. Okay, so to the topic of the future of motorcycling in Australia, and what I did first of all was have a look at a few statistics because I figured I'd better get some information and some data to be able to know what I was talking about. So, some facts and figures for Australia. As of 2025, our population is about 27.5 million people. The last figures I could find were for 2023, in which case it was said there were 21.2 light passenger and light commercial vehicles registered in Australia. Light commercial and light passenger, they are the vehicles that you and I drive, the ones you see in people's car, in their driveways, the ones you see in car parks and shopping malls and so on. In a good year, in the Australian market, they sell about 1.2 million new vehicles. In an average year, somewhere between about 980,000 and a million is considered to be an average year, and as I said, a good year is 1.2 million. The last figure I could find was for 2023, and in 2023 there were 965,000 motorcycles registered in Australia. So less than 1 million registered motorcycles, and therefore less than 1/20th of the motor vehicle fleet represents motorcycles. The last figure I could find for sales was in 2022, in which year there were 99,030 new motorcycles sold, and that was down 19.8 or 20% on the previous year. Now, for comparison, in the UK there are 60 million people, or thereabouts. There are 32.35 million motor vehicles. So possibly one vehicle for every 1.7 people or something, rather than almost one vehicle for every person in Australia. There are 1.33 million motorcycles, So a very small number of motorcycles compared to the number of cars. And the last year that I could find figures for was this year to October 24, October 2024 that is, so that would be last year. They sold 98,200 motorcycles, so slightly less than we sold in the year 2022. And you would think that not many motorcycles were sold in the months of November and December, because after all, who'd want to buy a motorcycle and have to put it in the garage for 3 or 4 months till the weather warmed up so you could ride it. Now in the United States, there are about 330 million people, I believe. There are 288 million motor vehicles registered. An average of 2 per household is how that was, the statistic was presented to me. There are 8.8 million motorcycles registered, and in 2022, the last year that I could find figures for, they sold 430,000. So is motorcycling in decline in Australia? And what are some of the reasons? Well, if we look at that figure that says the sales in 2022 were down nearly 20% on the previous year, that's not a very encouraging figure. The gentleman whose video I watched suggested there were a number of reasons, but number one reason he put forward was rules and regulations. He says there are too many rules and regulations, and to some extent I agree with him, but to a bigger extent I disagree with him. I think about it this way. What do we ask a 16-year-old to do in order to get a driver's licence? We require them to take a online test to say they know the road rules. We require them to then, if they pass that, to do 120 hours of logbook verified on-road driving. They're meant to drive in all sorts of conditions, on all sorts of roads, so sunny days, wet days, windy days, dark days, nighttime, foggy days, multi-lane motorways, dual carriageways, urban roads, and the odd goat track if they can find it. They have to have a fully licensed driver. In other words, no one on a provisional license can be their teacher or can be the person who satisfies their road experience. And they have to enter their driving experience into an online logbook, and the driver that they're with has to enter their license number so that what they say the driver has done can be verified. Now, after they've done that 120 hours, and by the way, most states have an incentive scheme that says if you take lessons with a driving school, 1 hour driving lesson, which I assume is a 50-minute hour, will count as 3 hours in your logbook. Now, those driving lessons, I guess, cost out at about $60 to $100 an hour. I'm not quite sure what it would be, but somewhere around there. So they are expensive, of course. But 120 hours the learner has to do before they can go for their driving test. If they're successful, there's a graduated system of licenses with red P, green P, and then a full license. There are restrictions that the driver has on how fast they can drive on the red provisional and the green provisional. There are also restrictions on how many people can be in the car and what time of the day the person can be out in their car. In other words, late at night they're not supposed to be on the road. And there are very severe restrictions with a long list of vehicles that provisional drivers cannot drive. Turbocharged, supercharged, high-powered vehicles, you're just not allowed to drive them. And I imagine if you do, your licence would be immediately cancelled. Now, in comparison, to get a motorcycle learner's permit, you have to take a stay upright course, which can be 2 half days or 1 full day with some theory and some riding on a motorcycle out on a testing ground where people who are qualified to teach you, instructors who are qualified to teach you, show you the basics of managing the clutch, the throttle, the brake lever, the brake pedal, keeping the bike upright at low speed, making turns, driving in and out of cones, and various things like that. If you pass that test, you're then given a certificate to say you passed, and you go and take the road theory test to show you know the road rules, and from that moment on, you can get on a motorcycle and you can ride it. But there are restrictions. There are restrictions that say you cannot ride a motorcycle with more than 150 kilowatts of power to weight ratio of 150 kilowatts, based on the rider's weight being 90 kilograms. And in most states, you cannot ride a motorcycle of more than 650 mil displacement. I think in Western Australia, that's 250 mil. And that restriction does not apply in the ACT, I think. But please check your own jurisdiction to find out what the restrictions are. There is a long list of motorcycles that you simply cannot ride when you're a learner. Now, I believe that those sets of rules and regulations have made motorcycling safer for this reason. Do we want a 16 or 17-year-old to go out and buy a Hayabusa or a very big Harley or Kawasaki Voyager 1700 like I had as my last bike and just start riding it? I suggest that we don't. I suggest that we want those young learners and even mature age riders who are coming back to riding after a long time, perhaps had the midlife crisis and decided to get a bike but haven't ridden for decades. Do we want them to just go out and start on big heavy bikes or high-speed powerful bikes? I suggest that we don't. I suggest that we want those riders to learn on less powerful bikes, not quite so heavy, so that they get their confidence up before they jump onto those bigger, heavier bikes. So rules and regulations, I believe that they've done the right thing there, the motoring authorities, and I believe that they have made motorcycling safer. Costs is another reason that suggested why motorcycling is in decline. A motorcycle is an expensive item to own. It's also expensive to run, not in terms so much of fuel consumption, but if you think about service costs and you think about compulsory insurance and registration and then comprehensive insurance and buying the gear that goes with it and so forth, it's an expensive luxury item. Most people need a car. If you have a family, you need a car to get your family around. But a motorcycle is a lifestyle thing where you say, well, the car's to take the family around, the motorcycle's for me to go off with my mates, whether they male or female, or whatever your group is, and go riding, go somewhere on a weekend, tell some war stories, have some lunch, and then ride home again without the rest of the family. That's your me time, buddy time, whatever you want to call it. And the motorcycle is a luxury item in those terms. Insurance is never going to be cheaper. Petrol's never going to be cheaper. Green slip is expensive because motorcycling is an inherently dangerous activity, and people who ride dangerously and do stupid things and injure themselves or other people, they force up everybody's premium because the insurance company says we're going to spread the risk over everybody, not just the fools who ride their bikes badly and get into accidents. Everybody pays a penalty because the insurance company wants to spread the risk. If you comprehensively insure your motorcycle, you can be certain, almost certain, that if you're in an accident, the motorcycle is going to be written off. Yes, you're going to get a payout, but then your premium is also going to go up. The equipment, the safety equipment, helmet, gloves, jacket, boots, pants, all that sort of stuff is expensive. You only buy it once to start off with and maybe renew it every 5 or 6 years or so. But if you can't afford the gear, you probably ought not to buy the motorcycle. Helmets are compulsory in Australia, and I don't think there's anybody that seriously would argue that they ought not to be. We know that serious head injuries can have catastrophic, if not fatal, impact on people's lives, and wearing a helmet protects you from those injuries and that sort of injury, and there's no arguments about it. Another reason he gave was people having trouble with the police. Now, in Australia, there are people who ride scooters. Mostly they ride those small capacity scooters because they're food delivery people or they're students and they just want to get to and from classes or university or something like that. But there are then the maxi scooters like the Suzuki 650 Bergman that I have. Not that I'm riding at the moment, but I do have one and I ride it a lot and I enjoy riding it. And there are lots of other maxi scooters like that. But those scooter riders are looked down on by the motorcyclists. Among the motorcyclists, there are what are called bikers. That is, people who ride motorcycles and may even belong to a motorcycle club, like the Ulysses Club or the Ducati Owners Club or the Harley Owners Group or something like that. And then there are what are referred to as bikies. Bikies are those people who belong to what are classified as proscribed organisations, illegal or outlaw motorcycle gangs. And those people certainly do have a lot of trouble with the police because they are considered to be criminal organisations, and whenever they're riding together anywhere, those groups, they can be almost certain the police will pull them all over and ask for proof of registration and licence, and see if there are any outstanding warrants and so on. I myself have probably clocked up about 300,000 kilometres on motorcycles, and I don't say that to boast, I just say it because it's a fact and I've got skin in the game. And I think in all the time that I've been riding motorcycles, I've only been pulled up by the police once, and that was because I went through on an orange light And when the police officer pulled me over, he asked me why I would do it. And then he suggested that it was because I was following my son, which I was, trying to give my son some instruction. And he gave me a warning. Now, I was very lucky, I admit to that. I was riding a big motorcycle, a Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager 1700. He didn't ask for any identification or license or registration or that sort of stuff. He just said, well, next time, you've got time at the traffic light, tell the guy to wait and so on, and gave me a warning. So I was very grateful. I'm not going to say you won't get pulled over by the police, but there are ways to avoid problems with the police. Drive to the speed limit. If you've got cruise control on your motorcycle, which I have on the Spider, use it. Set it at 100 and you will not likely get pulled over by the police for speeding. If you're lane filtering or lane splitting, whatever it's called in your jurisdiction, and it's legal to do that, do it, but use your indicators and let people know that you're doing it, and don't do it in such a way as it forces the driver in the lane that you're going into to brake suddenly to avoid a collision. So give yourself plenty of room and give the drivers behind you plenty of room. Drive to the conditions, the weather conditions, the road conditions, the conditions of your bike, and drive to your own skill level. That's not going to guarantee that the police won't ever pull you over. And if you're riding with a group of riders, then all agree that you're going to ride to the conditions. You're going to ride and you're going to obey the speed limit. You're going to obey the road laws. You're going to follow directions and ride safely and so on. And you'll probably be okay. But if you are pulled over by the police, as long as you are reasonably polite, I guess, and respectful, you might end up with a fine. I can't say you won't, but in most circumstances, if you've done nothing wrong and you've been driving correctly, then you probably will be okay. Another reasons that this gentleman put forward was that the lifestyle of the younger generation was different from his generation. He was younger than me. I would say he was in his 50s and I'm in my 70s. But he talked about his own children, I assume they were teenagers or in their early 20s, and how their way of socialising is to find some sort of social media and get together and talk to each other through social media. Whereas his way of socialising is to get together with his mates, jump on their bikes and say, let's go out for a ride somewhere, and they go off for the day and they ride for a few hours and come to somewhere where they just decide it's time to stop and have lunch and have some lunch, and as I said, shoot before, tell some war stories and shoot the breeze about previous rides and so on, and then ride home. They socialise by being face-to-face with each other and talking to each other and sharing stories in real time, face-to-face, whereas the younger generation, he says, prefers to do most of their socialising on some form of social media. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying it's a fact, and I think he was just saying it was a fact of life as well. Another of the reasons why motorcycling might be in decline is simply to do with the risks and safety of motorcycling. And the thing we have to accept here is that motorcycling is inherently a dangerous activity. You think about it, there's nothing between you and the road and the clothes you wear, the safety gear you wear, a helmet and gloves, and a couple of contact patches. In this case here, I've got 3 contact patches and I feel much safer. The bike is much more stable than a two-wheeler, but there's still nothing between me and the road than the clothing I wear. You cannot eliminate the risks of motorcycling, and you wouldn't want to, because part of the thrill of motorcycling is being out there in the elements with nothing between you and the road, with the wind in your face and the wind in your hair and so on. As opposed to being inside your car with the windows wound up and the air conditioning going and the heater going and the radio playing and all that. You've got on your bike because you want to get away from that and you want to ride in the elements. You cannot eliminate the risks. You can only deal with the things that you can deal with and try to minimise those risks in terms of your own safety. So, ride to be seen. Wear clothing that makes you visible to other motorists and motorcyclists. You're in all black motorcycle and all black gear, it's very hard to see you in the early hours of the morning when the sun isn't quite up, and it's very hard to see you at dusk when the sun has gone down and the shadows are lengthening and so on. So wear bright reflective clothing if you can. Make sure your light is on. Most bikes have permanently lit headlights, but make sure yours is on so that most other people can see you. Think about your following distance, how close you are to the vehicles in front of you, how close you are to the vehicles behind you. Are they giving you reasonable stopping distance as you go along? think about your position in the lane. So are you in a position where the driver in front of you can see you in his rear vision mirror or side mirrors? Do you stay in the one spot all the time, or do you move position slightly to draw the driver's attention to the fact that you are there? Oh, he's over near my right-hand side. Now maybe he's going to make a right-hand turn. Maybe he's going to move into the next lane. Maybe he's going to overtake me. That's the driver thinking that you're there. Now he's on the left-hand side. Maybe he's going to turn off here or something like that. So be in a position where you can be seen. Use your indicators and give plenty of indication of when you're changing lanes so that the drivers are aware that you're there. Remember that you may be in their blind spot. Hopefully they haven't turned off their blind spot detection in their vehicle and they can see you. Now all of that, so what? Well, so what is it? Motorcycling is a way of life. It's a way of people meeting and socialising, getting together and doing social things together. And if it disappears, then those people have lost that opportunity. And that's probably not what you call one of the good things in life. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the thoughts. If you have a comment, you know what to do. And I'll talk to you in the next motorcycling video.